Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Jake Ziegler, and I'm here with Brad Garoon. On Never Did It, we look back at the last 100 years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. Today we're covering the year 2019, and we have a very special guest with us. From the Set Lusting Bruce podcast, we have Jesse here with us today. Jesse, how are you?
I am fine. I feel like the ringer brought in by a corporate, right? Like somebody like an ex-NBA player joins in for their 5-on-5 league. Yes, I am ecstatic to join you two guys. I love this concept. In fact, we do a little bit of the same on one of my other podcasts, JKL Media. Two friends and I meet, and we pick something that at least one of us has never watched. For example, Haunting of Bly Manor.
Sure.
I've never seen that. And then we watch it with a veteran and a rookie perspective. And that way you kind of fill in the holes, because we all have holes in our pop culture understanding. So this is a great concept.
Cool. Well, I guess we ripped you off a little bit. I hope you're not doing every year for the last 100 years.
No. And in fact, this is just something that we're doing a Babylon 5 rewatch.
Oh, cool.
And we just decided that for one-offs, it would be fun to pick something. So yeah, it's great.
Awesome. All right, well, let's jump into Blinded by the Light. So I'm just going to give a little bit of my background. So I'm here with two Bruce Springsteen mega fans, and I am not anti, but pretty agnostic on Springsteen. What I'm not agnostic on is Bollywood films. And this movie was directed by Gurinder Chadha, who is, I think, most known for Bend It Like Beckham. Mm-hmm. And what she basically did here was make a British Bollywood film, which is kind of cool if you can get on that level. And I don't think I knew that the first time I tried to watch this in, I would guess, 2020. I once tried to watch this on an airplane, I think on my way to Texas just before the pandemic broke out. And I got through about 20 minutes and I'm like, I'm not vibing with this on this plane. I tried again a couple years later because Jake won't stop talking about how much he likes it. Again, didn't get through it. This time I got through it quite easily. Now I've got a few more Bollywood movies under my belt, but I was surprised by how much this movie wears its heart on its sleeve. And if you can't handle that kind of sincerity, this isn't for you. And if you can, you can. So it's about a young Pakistani teen named Javed, who is having trouble, not so much fitting in. He's got a good friend. He's got a couple of good friends at school, but the National Front has a big presence. The right-wing National Front has a big presence in his community, which is becoming more and more Pakistani. That's causing a lot of strife, and he has a tough relationship with his very strict dad. And it's about how Bruce Springsteen helps him understand who he is and how he wants to relate to the world. Jesse, why don't we ask you first, guest first? Did you see this right when it came out, and what'd you think of it? First thoughts?
Yeah, so you may have to tell me okay, Jesse, that's enough. You've talked too much. Yeah, when I heard about this, I went crazy. And in fact, I was at work and we were in a conference with some of my staff, and I actually pulled up the preview on the trailer on the big screen, and I go, how much do you think I want to see this movie? And they're just harassed. Like, I can't believe, especially because it starts with this 80s, don't you want me? So they're like, they didn't catch it. I actually ended up having a dozen Springsteen fans from the DFW area show up at the same theater. It was one of those that has a bar in the lobby. And so we had a Blinded by the Light watching party. So we all met beforehand, had drinks, talked about it, went and saw it. So this was really great. There is one huge, and I'm curious if Jake knows what I'm talking about, what the Springsteen moment in the movie were like, no, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And only us Springsteen nerds would have gotten it. That's when he quotes the river after, and he gave him Darkness and he gave him Born in the USA. And he quotes the lyrics from the river. That song is not on either cassette.
But doesn't he watch it at some point? I think he's watching him on TV. Doesn't he see the river? He sees him sing the river. But is it before that he quotes it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I said, that in my mind canon, he went to the store, picked up the river and cassette to hear it, or he watched that documentary. But I loved it. And I can't wait to talk more about it.
Jake, you, I assume, saw right when it came out.
Yes, we did see it right when it came out, and I live in a Brad, as you know, but Jesse, I live in a very small town in northern Michigan, so we don't always get every movie. My wife and I actually had to drive about an hour and a half out of our way to see it down to this town called Traverse City, where my parents live. And my wife at the time was not a huge Springsteen fan. Like, she knew Dancing in the Dark and, Born in the USA and, like this one with Bruce's butt on the cover. So she knew some of the songs, everything, but obviously she knew I was obsessed, and Western Stars had come out that year, and she had listened to that and had actually kind of liked it. So she was super game to see this movie. And Brad, you said we were just so moved by the sincerity of the movie, like they said, that's either going to work for you or it's not. The sincerity of the movie, I think, really matches kind of the sincerity of the music. I mean, Bruce absolutely wears his heart on his sleeve, and that's kind of the hallmark of his music and has been for 50 years. That's kind of his whole thing. That's his brand. There's not a lot of mystery in his music. There's a lot of comparisons, especially early Springsteen got compared to Dylan, but I don't think there's really much comparison to that anymore, because Springsteen is just so like honest and sincere, and Dylan is so much more removed and kind of mysterious in a lot of ways. So I think the movie kind of matches Springsteen in like the tone and the emotion of it, and we both really liked it a lot. And I've seen it a couple of times since, and I still love. I mean, I just watched it the other night, and I still loved it. It just makes me smile through the whole thing, and I love the musical numbers of it. Like you said, I've seen some more Bollywood stuff now, and I never would have pictured like Thunder Road or Badlands being like big musical numbers, but I thought they worked really well when they did them. So yeah, this movie is just a big warm hug for me.
Yeah. Okay. So I didn't have that response to it, but I did like the musical numbers. On a technical level, I don't like the way the musical numbers were executed, but on a sort of emotional level, I do. And the part that caught me was that Javed is singing over Springsteen in all of these scenes. It sounds bad, but it works, obviously, because that's what you do when you're discovering and becoming obsessed with a band that you like, is you sing over the music in your car, as you're walking down the street, or as you're corralling hundreds of people in Luton, England to dance with you. But I had to keep telling myself, this is a Bollywood movie. Think about this the way you thought about Three Idiots. It's like that kind of vibe. Because otherwise, so many of Javed's little monologues literally felt like a stick to my stomach. Like, this is too sincere for you. No one is like this in real life. You have to hate this. But if I think about it in the lens of like, okay, well, this is very similar to what I saw in, I keep going back to Three Idiots, because that's the most like similar vibe I can think of as like a straight comedy or a sincere comedy that I get. Well, Three Idiots had some like suicidal ideation in it, but aside from that.
Yeah, the 3-hour movie. There was a lot in that movie.
It was. And I'm very thankful that this was only a 2-hour movie. That was the right amount of time for this. I actually think they could have cut out a little. But when I thought the movie worked best was when it was at its most like magically real. So like when Javed's first discovering Springsteen and he's thrown out all of his poems into the street, and then there's a cyclone of his poetry around a lamp hole. That's such a cool visual, and it inspires him to go outside and have this big emotional explosion that he never got to have before. He's so pent up. That worked really well for me. I think maybe the other thing that didn't was, let's say, like the next door neighbor friend character, who's played by the guy from 1917, Dean Charles Chapman. I didn't understand the point. First off, to give Javed someone who had been kind to him forever, but then wasn't going to factor into like what he experienced at school. I think I just must have missed it. Why this guy wasn't in school with him? Was he older?
So I am not as familiar with the British school system, so I get the feeling this looks like high school to us in America, but I think there's different paths in the UK, and his friend might have been going through the other path. Like this guy is going for A levels, so he may have been going in a different, like a trade school for secondary school versus academics.
I should have asked my British colleague before. When I saw it.
One of the things that I think this movie does really well is it shows, when I send an invite to someone to join me on Set Listing Bruce, I have an agenda I normally send. And in my thing, if you are not a fan of Bruce Springsteen, substitute the word Bruce for wherever your favorite musician is. Right. So I think this movie, not only, I'd never thought of it as a Bollywood movie, and so now then I love it even more. The idea that this is the story of what happens when you become obsessed with anything.
Well, sure.
You become obsessed, you over-authorize, and then later you come down to a more healthy passion. And I thought that journey of that was really well done in this, to show that in a lot of ways, this passion for Bruce was almost unhealthy, right? That because he needed that. And then the other point, you mentioned just a few minutes about him in the storm. I thought what was really one of the most powerful moments is when he goes, "This guy can't speak for me." And then when he plays Dancing in the Dark and they're throwing the lyrics, and it is exactly his life at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that because often Dancing in the Dark is kind of, oh yeah, that's Bruce's pop hit, when actually there's a lot of depth to that song.
I agree with you 100% about the construction of the movie. I think that works so well. I think it could have been done without this the
Sure.
Gene Charles Chapman character, because so much of it is about his relationship with his father. And you have this great scene where the National Front confronts the Pakistani community and his father's attacked, and Javed's nowhere to be seen because he's off buying Springsteen tickets. And that's a great distillation of how he's gone too far with his fandom. He's let it distract him from this very important day where his sister is getting married. Although now I have to ask, there's a sort of throwaway line in the beginning where he calls one of his sister's cousin, and then his dad insists that she's his sister. And I just didn't get what was going on there. It's not important to the movie, but I just didn't understand why it was there.
My understanding of it, I just took that it was like literally his cousin, but they had taken her in and that they were viewing her as a sister.
Yeah. And then I guess my question to that is why, which is explained in the credits when you find out this is a real story about a real guy.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the nice things about adapting a real life story to a movie is, as we saw in like The Iron Claw, when they took an entire brother out of that movie because enough is enough.
We can't, people will not believe that there's been that much suicide in this family. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So Jake, what else did you love about the movie? Like why 5 stars aside from it's a Springsteen film? Because that by default can't make it a 5-star movie.
It doesn't by default, but there are a number of things that I do like about the movie. I mean, number one, I love the way that the songs are used and when they're used and which songs they use. Like I said, other than the one time when they use The River, they do only use songs from the 2 cassettes that he gave them, The Darkness on the Edge of Town and Born in the USA. And I think the songs are used in a really effective way and like really used at the right times to really illustrate the story and really illustrate the journey that he's going on. And again, because I know these songs so well, like the second I hear them start, like, oh, great, good. This is exactly like in it. I can really pick up on that right away. And that's a really, it's like a serotonin boost for that. It's like, like, so I'm getting, a simultaneous storytelling boost from the movie and also from the song that I know and I love so well. And Jesse mentioned too, the journey. I love the journey of the obsession. Like, I think you could substitute, you do in your podcast, substitute Bruce for any other thing that you're obsessed with, whether it's, a musician or a movie or an author, just anything that you get obsessed with, that unrequited love and passion that you get for something. I think Javed, the actor who played him, I think just did an incredible job showing, what that feels like and, what the hole that fills and, what that does, to your life when you really need that because of where he's been in his life. And I think there's a lot of that going on in the movie, just musically, and that's really cool. I also think it's a pretty good family drama. The story between him and his dad comes to a nice conclusion, and then I think the drama in the country I think is sets a good backdrop for the music and for the family drama as well. So I think there's three main plot points that I think thread together really well, and I like the sincerity of the movie. It's not going to work in every movie, but I think really pairing it with the songs, pairing it with this particular person and this story. I mean, I love the scene where Javed and his friend who introduced him to Springsteen, when they go to Asbury Park and they take photos of like all the places that, here's Bruce's childhood home, and, here's E Street where they rehearsed, and here's the Stone Pony where Bruce played and still plays. I think he shows up there from time to time. I mean, that's like something I would do. Been to Asbury Park once, and it was only for a wrestling show, and I was basically literally in and out. I had no time to go around and stay, but I'd love to go to Asbury Park and just kind of, tour around there. So it checked a lot of boxes for me, and like I said, it makes me feel so good. It can't not be a 5-star for me.
I wish that had not been a montage, that there had been any just like set scene in Asbury Park, because it's a pretty big, important thing for him. He's leaving his hometown for the first time in his life. You got that really fun scene at Border Patrol where he's accepted right away by the guys who are probably from New Jersey, who tell him it's good that he's there because he's a Bruce fan.
So Brad, I hate to interrupt you, but I'm about to make you like that scene even more.
Great.
I read the book this is based on, and that truly happened, but at a different time in his life. He was traveling to New Jersey after 9/11, and they were staring at him because him being Pakistan. And it was after 9/11, and he said there was a visible tension that someone that looks like someone who, a Muslim, and he goes to the person and he says, "What are you here for?" And he says, "I'm here for a Bruce Springsteen concert." And the guy basically said that. He broke it and said, I can't think of a better reason for you to come to the U.S. Welcome and enjoy the boss.
So I like it, especially because it shows that there wasn't a slavish devotion to the source material. They made it work within the context of the movie. I do like that a lot.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder why they added the sister as a cousin. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I do. You're right. You did. I like that more, knowing that. I have to admit something.
Sure.
I didn't know Blinded by the Light was a Springsteen song. I knew it as a Manfred Mann.
Sure, many people don't, yes.
Yep. But I found it interesting to learn that Springsteen's top charting hit as a writer is the Manfred Mann version of the song. Which has to sting a little. Well, I guess it would sting if he wasn't such an iconic part of music history. But
Bruce has never had a #1 hit.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
I mean, Dancing in the Dark is the closest. He'll have to just settle with his 27 Grammys. I mean, no, I'm joking, right? But it does seem like, I wonder if he goes just at night going, damn it, just one. Could I have just gotten one?
Yeah.
I could have been a contender, Patty.
Right. I don't know. Maybe it's just from what I'm used to, but I was like, this sounds so different than what
it's a very different song. A couple of things real quick. I know we've got to move to the other movie.
Sure.
I love seeing Haley Atwell.
I'm glad you brought this up, because I wanted to ask, because I thought she was wasted in this.
I thought she was really well done because, in the biographical, right, the tropes, you have to have someone supporting you, and the English teacher is a common trope. And I think that was well done. I also thought that the actress who plays his love interest, Nell Williams, incredibly charismatic, very beautiful. I thought it was a sweet love song when he's like, you and me, and she goes, Anna Bruce. Of course, right? Like, there's always Bruce.
Well, I said that out loud as she was saying it. I'm like, which one of them is going to say "and Bruce"?
And I loved at the end when she quotes the river, or no, she quotes "Hungry Heart" to him. To kind of when he's apologizing to her. So I really liked the love story too. So I thought it was fun.
I should say my favorite scene in the whole movie is right after that "You, Me, and Bruce" scene, his sister walks in on them making out, and so now he owes her a favor to keep this a secret.
Yeah.
And he takes her to a daytime dance party where he, instead of listening to music that all of his Asian friends are listening to, he puts on his headphones, listens to Springsteen, and then this look comes over his face, and you think he's seeing something bad, but what he's seeing is his sister and this guy, and they kind of play it up like he might act like his father and not approve. But what I love about the scene is sort of an aside thing where he just takes off his headphones and starts dancing to the same music everyone around him is dancing to, which I really liked, because in that moment I was like, why are you ignoring this great thing that's happening all around you? So I'm really glad they showed that side of him also.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, what that said is he realizes that other people can be passionate and just as vital about a different genre of music or a different thing. So yeah, I thought that was a really, really sweet moment. And to defend him a little bit, Bruce doesn't come to the UK too often. And remember, you had to stand in line. You couldn't go online. I mean, I'm not saying he's totally right getting tickets on wedding day, but I'm just saying I understand it just a little. Just a little. He may not get a chance to see Bruce again.
He's proven wrong at every turn.
Yes, he is.
The conclusion is wrong, and he gets to the record store and no one has bought a ticket.
Yeah, exactly. So, but he didn't know that.
Jake, any other thoughts about Blinded?
Yeah, there just one other scene when you mentioned the love story. I love too when he first plays Bruce for, and he's doing the lyrics for "Prove It All Night." I love "Prove It All Night." That's one of my favorite Bruce songs, and I love that scene too, where they're in the snow and he's putting the headphones on her. Just a lot of sweet little scenes in this movie.
What I liked about that was, he seems so dorky, and he is. I mean, throughout the movie, I'm like, this guy is such a dork. But like, one of the funnier lines in the movie is early on when he's at his neighbor's house, and his girlfriend is like, yeah, I've got a friend coming. She'd be great for you. Oh, really? Yeah, she's not fussy. And he's excited. He's like, oh, perfect. He's not offended. He's just excited.
Yeah.
But later, when he's having that scene with the girl and he kisses her for the first time, it shows, he has a great personality. He's actually quite smooth. This movie would be a great antidote for like the incel movement. Just like if you're just normal and not a jerk and embrace the things you like and are cool about them, people will like you. You don't have to be a weirdo.
I was able to exchange emails with the writer of the book, and I shared with him that in the book, because the story was how he ended up, the novel is more not only his relationship with his father, but how he came to understand that he was Pakistan and British at the same time. There was the thought he had to pick one or the other, and he chose to do both. And blatant plug, during the pandemic, on I think it was an early Sunday morning, the director actually joined me for an episode of Set Listing Bruce. I was able to interview her and talk about her. She is a massive Bruce fan, as is the writer, and they do make the joke in the interviews that they usually stand out from the crowd.
Yeah.
So if you guys are interested in hearing her talk about it, Set Listing Bruce, it was a fun interview. If I could get political for a little bit, I thought the scene of where the neighbor talked about he fought people with swastikas and now he did not think he was seeing, obviously in 2019 that hit to us, and today here in 2024 it hits again. And I won't dwell too much into politics, but I just thought that was, the more things change, the more things stay the same.
That was also the only movie I had like a strong emotional connection to, was that man showing up and talking about how this young Pakistani's show of rebellion against white supremacy reminded him of his own during World War II. It was very powerful. I like that he kept popping up throughout the movie.
And how proud he was, and the father couldn't understand it. And you got to admit, the father's pretty much a jerk.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of handing his home, like, give me the money. Like, okay. And especially like when he tells her, we need the money, you need to do more sewing. And I'm like, and I know he's trying to get a job. They show that. But that is not the kindest view of him whatsoever.
To the point that I actually didn't buy his turnaround at the end of the movie. I'm like, I actually don't think that seeing your son standing on stage is the thing that would do this for you. I think it's your son handing you a few $100s is the thing that would, oh yes, being a writer is lucrative, I accept. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that if that had been the thing either. And I think it would have been a little bit more realistic, but probably wasn't as close to what happened. All right, so let's move on to another touching but pretty upsetting in the end film. It's a documentary by Garrett Price called Love, Antosha, about the life and death of Anton Yelchin. When I watched this, I had just a quick story. I had gotten a septoplasty. I couldn't breathe out of one of my nostrils. I had a septoplasty, and in my recovery, I turned this on because I was always a big Anton Yelchin fan. Was pretty shocked by his death almost 10 years ago now. 8 years ago he died. I couldn't believe when I was just rewatching this week, I was like, oh my God, this movie is 5 years old. That's crazy. And it's a really interesting story about his parents fleeing Russia because of anti-Semitism in Russia, coming to the States, getting Anton into acting in a way as an antidote for his cystic fibrosis, which was a very serious disease that he suffered from his whole life and was starting to take its toll on him when he was killed in a freak automobile accident outside of his home. #ban cars. They got everyone he ever worked with pretty much to be in this movie and talk about him, and had Nicolas Cage narrate his voice through the letters that he wrote to his mom and the notes that he took in his notebook. And I was really surprised, Jake, that you hadn't seen this. Thought you should, because as far as, biopics of documentary biographies of people who didn't live a very long time, I thought this was very, very good. Garrett Price has only directed a few movies, but one of them was Woodstock 99, which I only know about because I listened to Ringer podcast and it was produced by them. This I thought was much better than that. What did you think?
I thought it was terrific. I mean, I knew obviously Anton Yelchin. I'd seen quite a number of his movies, and everybody was shocked and sad. I mean, just what a tragic ending to his life. I mean, you couldn't come up with that in a in a screenplay. I mean, just what a weird, just such an odd, horrible way for him to go. Especially knowing knowing now, I don't think this was well known during his life. Like they said in the documentary, that he had the cystic fibrosis. That wasn't really well known. So knowing that he already had had been given a limit on his lifespan, and that it still ended up coming to somehow an even more tragic end than he had already been given. I mean, it's devastating. It was simultaneously a hard watch, but also, kind of moving and uplifting in a certain way, knowing how many people, like he had everybody in this movie, how many people he had worked with and touched and, been close with in so many different ways. I mean, you've got people as varied as Martin Landau and Chris Pine. I had no idea he was friends with Martin Landau. I mean, I did not expect to see him pop up in the movie, and Chris Pine and Zoe Saldana, who had done Star Trek with, and, I know he'd worked with Robin Williams and David Duchovny, and they talked to his parents, and there's just so much that I obviously didn't know about him, and it was just a really interesting portrait of a guy who had a lot of interests and a lot of talent and a lot of that we just never got to see, and we'll never get to see. So it was moving in a lot of ways. I cried, I laughed. It's a lot of everything. It's a really, really good documentary. Like you, I'm surprised I didn't get to it when it came out. I don't know why. I don't really have a reason for that, but I'm really glad you recommended it.
Yeah, I'm the same boat. I had never heard of this. And so when you guys invited me to join and were kind enough to say, hey, if you just want to do Blinded by the Light, and I'm like, no, this sounds like fun. So I watched the documentary and was first off shocked at how much he had done in his career besides being Chekhov, right? I just had never connected the dots. Like, oh yeah, that kid. Oh yeah, that. One of the things that really struck out to me is that it was a very honest portrayal of this young man. They showed his flaws. They showed his demons that he was fighting with and his dark times. I just really, really loved it and did feel that being taken too young. He could have done so much more if he had lived on. And as you said, just I vaguely remember the tragic death, but the idea of not being able to breathe is something he fought all the time, and then to die not being able to breathe is just incredibly tragic.
Chris Pine did a hell of a job illustrating that sentiment. Yeah.
I thought it was really cool, like his people from Star Trek to talk about him. That did not surprise me. But when you hear William Dafoe, as you said, Martin Landau, people old school, Jodie Foster, these people that are going, how good he was, you're like, wow, it is really nice. And you could tell it isn't, oh, we're going to change our thoughts of him because he died tragically. So therefore, no, this was truly, he was someone that people loved interacting with and loved being on set with. And, he really brought his A game when he had to act at the roles.
Totally. I think that first showed itself when Frank Langella, of all people, comes on, exalting him as a child actor.
Yeah.
Like, this little kid is so much more in tune than so many actors. Not only is he on set watching me do what I do, he stays after he doesn't go to his trailer. He stays, he asks me questions. I'm like, oh, how can you not love this kid right off the bat? And the thing that Price does that I think, the director does that I think works really well, Jesse, to your point, is they don't just show these interviews. You get interspersed home videos of not just Anton from when he was a kid, but backstage during the shoots. He's out with his co-stars having a good time. People clearly love him. There's this great shot of him and Sofia Boutella just going around whatever. I think it was Paris or London or something, somewhere cold. And it's so cute just watching them spend this time together. Even when he's upset, he looks like he's deeply thinking about things. And I think also having his childhood friends, his non-actor friends, his musician friends be in the movie also added to that. It made me really want to go through and watch all of his movies, especially now that it's a set amount of films, even though a lot of them are probably like indie schlock, just like, really strange choices.
Yeah.
I'm still really curious to watch all of his movies. I was after I watched it the first time, and I was again this week.
Well, he even said it at some point, like he just wanted to act. He didn't even, the quality wasn't so concerning because he could find something interesting in just about any role that he thought. So yeah, there probably are. And there's a lot of movies in there, like where they show clips of like, I've never heard of this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm a pretty in tune to movies guy, but some of these is like, I'm not even familiar with this title.
Yeah. And I love that, especially because his life was cut off so quickly. I remember reading a biography of Bobby Darin, and they said the same thing, that he, because of his heart condition, he suspected he would die young. So he really put in a lot of emphasis and wanted things done. This just seemed like he loved acting, right? And so it didn't matter. The line in Wedding Crashers, it's pizza, good pizza, bad pizza, cold pizza, it's pizza. He's like, it's acting. I just don't care what the role is. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to enjoy. That's what I love to do. I love the stories about him learning how to play the guitar. I wonder, do either one of you know why they chose Nicolas Cage to do the narration? Because I didn't know if there was a connection between the two, or maybe a connection with the director.
Yeah, so they were in a movie together. Another one of they show a clip of it during the movie, Dark. It's a Paul Schrader movie. Paul Schrader, just wildly prolific, this guy. Can barely speak, but directs like a movie every year. So yeah, they'd been in that movie together. I think they did another one also. I think maybe they did two. I thought it was perfect. Cage, my guess is Cage probably didn't want to be interviewed for this. He's not the most public when it comes to stuff like this, but this was a great way for him to contribute. But yeah, that's really all I know about it. I don't know too much about the production. I was just blown away by the fact that it seems like everyone he ever worked with is interviewed in the movie, with the one very noticeable and relieving exception. I'm really glad that when Jodie Foster was interviewed, they didn't also interview Mel Gibson, because I think it would have really disrupted the vibe of the film.
I've never watched that movie. It just seemed weird to me. Now I'm kind of halfway interested because to see Anton's performance. I don't know if I will, but at least before it was I have no interest whatsoever. And now I'm like, well, maybe I'll throw this on my queue, and when I don't have anything else to do, I'll do that.
I did see The Beaver right when it came out, and I remember thinking, which has been over 10 years at this point, by 12 or 13 years, I think. And I remember thinking it was kind of an interesting concept, but also kind of distracting, because also, yes, I can't stand Mel Gibson, so it is. So that's kind of my memory of it. But I'd be willing to go back and give it another look now in light of having seen this documentary.
Sure. I have to give, just from the hating Mel Gibson because I'm a Jew perspective, it was very interesting to see not just that Anton worked with him. I mean, he was a young actor. He didn't have a lot of say in who he worked with, but to see the photos of Yelchin's mother being friendly with Gibson backstage was very interesting. She's a religious refugee. So very curious, and makes you wonder if, the reason Gibson gets work again now is because maybe there is actually rehabilitation that's gone on there, but I can't speak to that.
I did think it was interesting, his parents being celebrities, and having that background. I cannot imagine losing a child. And this was a very loving tribute to their affection toward him and how much they cared about him. And it was sad when you talked about toward the end, the cystic fibrosis was becoming worse. And I have heard other stories about that, like trying to break it up the lungs so you can move, having to do all that before he goes on stage. It was a very sweet tribute.
This movie really made me want to be nicer to my mom. He's so sweet to his mother in all these emails. And granted, he knew he had a limited amount of time with her, but we all don't know how much time we have with our family. And it's interesting when you watch movies like this and you're like, I am just not nice enough to my parents.
Yep.
Yeah. Jake, this got no Oscar love, right?
No, it didn't. The Academy puts out, it made the initial list of documentaries, like they put out a list of 150 or 160 eligible documentaries, and then they whittle it down to a short list of 15, and it did not make that short list of 15. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Hollywood loves patting itself on the back, so I'm kind of surprised.
A little surprised, yeah.
Yeah, I am too, because I would have thought, especially as many people are there, as we talked about, almost every role, and some pretty heavy duty people. Yeah, that's crazy.
The documentaries that did get nominated that year, let me know if you've heard of any of these. I've seen all of them because I'm obsessive about the Oscars. American Factory was the winner that year, which is very good. All of these, and all 5 of these are actually very good. American Factory was the winner. There's a film called The Cave, The Edge of Democracy, which is about Brazil and everything that they've gone through. Forsama was another one that year, and then Honeyland was another one that I go through what they're all about. But they were good. So there were 5 good documentaries, but I really loved this one. And yeah, I was a little surprised it didn't at least make the final list of 15.
I guess I kind of get it, because only the documentarians are nominating, right?
Right. Mm.
So this isn't a formally interesting movie. It's talking heads and home footage.
Right.
But it's touching.
It is.
All right. Shall we dive into our top 10s of 2019?
Sounds awesome.
Jesse, lay it on us.
All right. So, I had a little bit of, this was a lot of fun for me, is you go, okay, let me look at, and there were, what do you do with all the Marvel stuff, right?
If you're me, you cheat and you have a 3-way tie at number 10.
So I'm going to do, and remind me, do you guys do top to bottom, bottom to top? What do you normally
Bottom
do?
to top.
So number 10 to me, Bombshell. I loved that movie. I knew kind of vaguely things about what was going on, but I thought it was really well done. A lot of fun on a very unfun subject, but I enjoyed the movie. I cheated a little bit. Tall Girl from Netflix. I just recently watched that. And for a teen rom-com, it has a lot of charm and a lot of just kind of aware that it's kind of making fun of itself. So that's number 9.
I
8.
have to say, before you get to 8, I'm so happy that you put something like that on your list, because so that movie is like widely derided and panned, and I love when people just embrace the stuff they like, despite what I've never seen Tall Girl because
Yeah.
it has bad reviews.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll check it out now.
Yeah, I mean it, and I am a sucker for Hallmark movies, and so I just thought it was really funny. Deadwood, I was late to the Deadwood thing. It was actually during the pandemic. I said, "Oh, look, I have HBO Max. I'm just gonna go," and I binged Deadwood all in one setting. Over the couple of weeks, and went, God, how did I miss this series? This is amazing. So I was really happy to be that.
Did you find the Deadwood movie to be a satisfying ending to the show?
Yeah, I did.
Did you? I've
Yeah.
always, because I'm obsessed with that show. I loved it to death. Jake, did you see that? Did you watch Deadwood? Oh,
Never
you
did.
should. Incredible show.
Yeah.
Which had an unsatisfying series finale because they didn't know that it was going to be the series finale. And then the
Yeah.
movie, I mean, granted, you've got a pedophile in the movie because Jeffrey Jones, who was found to be a pedophile, is
Yeah.
then cast. I think he has like no speaking roles though. And then some of the cast had died, so there were limitations.
Yeah.
But
And I was just happy to spend more time in that town, that world. And I think it helped that I knew kind of after the circumstances, this felt like this was in a concert. You've already had them do the encore, and you thinking you're not. I will tie it back to Bruce. I was in Louisville, Kentucky. They had done Twist and Shout. He had done Thunder Road. The show was over. The band had left the stage. Max gave his drumsticks to someone in the stage, and Bruce picked up his guitar, and you could see everyone like, what? And they did Bobby Jean. So it was like this, oh, we got a bonus. So that's how I felt that. Another rom-com, Always Be My Maybe, I think was always a little bit of fun. My son adores WWE wrestling.
You are speaking to, I mean, we are
we're huge fans.
lifelong WWE fans. So
Yeah.
So I watched Fighting with My Family, and then I made my son, like, you've got to watch it. I don't want to watch. No, we've got to watch this movie. And so we got to watch it together. I was fascinated by the lead, and turns out she's got a few chops, doesn't she? Sad moment, right? I'm watching Oppenheimer, and I'm going, who is his girlfriend? God, she is charismatic. And then afterwards, oh, she's the new Black Widow. Of course, she's amazing.
Yeah. This was kind of a breakout for her, though.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then my 3, Captain Marvel, Spider-Man, Far From Home, Avengers Endgame. You could swap any of those around. Probably Avengers Endgame, I think, goes the highest because you were kind of dropping it up. Then A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I loved the article, and then I liked Tom Hanks' performance. Just the idea of looking for helpers. And then a movie that I had no idea what was happening. I watched Booksmart, and I went, oh my God, the idea of a crude buddy comedy with female leads was just hilarious. So that was number 1 for me because it surprised the hell out of me, right? I just did not expect them. So that's my 10.
So I love that. Of your 10, I only have 2 of those, even in my top 20. Really interesting stuff. I'm going to real quick go through some honorable mentions, like fast. The Two Popes I've talked about on this show before, by the guy who made City of God. Incredible movie, great cast, about a real story, the transition of our last 2 popes. I say our, I'm not Catholic. I think Bad Education, the HBO movie starring Hugh Jackman, is very, very good. The Art of Self-Defense, starring Jesse Eisenberg, directed by Riley Stearns, is so weird, but a great indie movie. One of the better strange Jesse Eisenberg movies. Dolomite Is My Name, which got completely ignored because it came out on Netflix, but just hilarious. A great comeback for Eddie Murphy, who's like always coming back, but he's like great in every one of his comebacks. And then an amazing performance by Wesley Snipes, who we've talked about as being like a much more important figure in Hollywood history than he's given credit for. And he's so good in Dolomite Is My Name. And then just talking about wrestling, The Peanut Butter Falcon is a great movie that features Jake the Snake Roberts and Mick Foley and also Shia LaBeouf in just a really touching story that my father-in-law hates for some reason. But I think this movie is amazing.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, I'm going to cheat. I'm doing a 3-way tie for number 10. 2019 is a great movie year. doing a three-way tie. 2 animated films. One is Away by Gintz Zilbalotis. He has a new movie out in theaters right now called Flow. This was his first feature film, Away. He made it all by himself. There's no one else in the credits. It's just him. He made an animated feature film by himself about a kid who crash lands on an island and has to run away from a golem, basically. That's the whole movie. It's just him trying to find different ways to get away. And he's also taking care of a bird that got hurt. Incredible. Tukes and Fanny, I've talked about on this show before. This is another animated movie made by one guy, by Albert Birney, who is the nephew of a different Birney, who's actually a relatively famous actor. This movie is made in 8-bit. It looks like a Nintendo game, and it's in Russian, despite being an American movie, and it's very episodic. It was released initially on Instagram, I want to say. Jake, I know you don't like this very much, but I just think Tukes and Fanny is so interesting about a little pink blob and a little purple blob and their thoughts about the universe. And then last, tied for number 10, is Avengers Endgame. Unfortunately, I feel is like the last gasp of greatness from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There have been MCU movies I've liked since then. Doctor Strange 2 comes to mind as one that I think it's slammed unfairly. We've talked about that in our Sam Raimi podcast, but I think Endgame is great and was one of the more satisfying theater experiences I've had. It really sucks that Robert Downey Jr. is back. I'm really mad about it. He was such a great I'm curious what they do, but I'm really mad about it. My number 9 is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I watched this with my wife when I had COVID. I got COVID right when COVID hit. I was like an early adopter. And I was sick for 2 months. And so we watched this over Zoom. I was living in New York. She was living in New Jersey. She wasn't my wife yet. Looking at each other on FaceTime, looking at the movie. Very touching Celine Sciamma movie, Forbidden Love. My number 8, Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Didn't like this one so much when I saw it in the theater. Watched it back again a couple summers ago and realized that it is the kind of movie you need to see twice to really appreciate.
I watched it only once and found it boring. And now then that's a good reminder that I should pull that up again and try it with a new mindset, right?
Absolutely. Just like knowing it's a cool movie to watch again, knowing what you know about it, because you start to see that he really does put all the pieces in place for that finale throughout the film. It's very satisfying.
Okay.
My number 7 is The Farewell, a movie I feel like is a little forgotten. It was a Lulu Wang movie starring Awkwafina in far and away her best performance ever. Her grandmother has lung cancer. The family decides not to tell her that they have lung cancer, and they stage a wedding. Almost fake wedding. It's a real wedding, but it's sort of forced upon the cousin who has to have it as a farewell to her so that she doesn't know that it's a way for everyone to say goodbye to her. It turns out the true story is she never knew she had lung cancer. And because of that, she never succumbed to despair. And she lived she may even still be alive, but for many, many years after she was diagnosed, she lived. My number 6 is 1917. We talked a lot today about Dean Charles Chapman. He's one of the 2 stars of 1917, along with George McKay. This is one of those, Jake, you talked about this in a recent episode, one of these oneer movies. This one's by Sam Mendes. It's part of the 60% of movies he makes that are good and not the 40% that he makes that are bad. And I think his good movies are very good. And I think this is one of them, about 2 British soldiers who have to get a message across enemy lines to a British officer. It's really stirring. It was another one of the 2019. It really sucks about the pandemic because there were so many great theater movies in 2019, and this was one of them. My number 5 is Midsommar, my favorite Ari Aster movie. I think my favorite horror movie about a bunch of college kids who go to Sweden, and it's also they go there for one of their to research their master's thesis. There's all kinds of relationship dynamics between them, most of which Florence Pugh, who we mentioned as the star of Fighting with My Family, she's also the star of this film. Her parents and sister have just died in a brutal murder-suicide. It's about her bad relationship with her boyfriend, played by Jack Rayner. This movie is so scary. It's so visually stunning and really tense and uncomfortable in a satisfying way, I think. My number 4 is my favorite John Wick movie, my favorite John Wick movie, Parabellum, Chapter 3. I don't have too much to say. If you like John Wick, you like John Wick. If you don't, you don't. This is like pure, straight to the vein John Wick, and it's not 3 hours long. I love John Wick 4, but it's a lot to take. It's a lot of movie. My number 3 is Rian Johnson's Knives Out. As a huge Hercule Poirot, Agatha Christie head, this is exactly the kind of movie that I want. A real bombastic version of a murder mystery, everyone's stuck in a house. And Daniel Craig created an incredible character in Benoit Blanc. My number 2 is Parasite, Bong Joon-ho's last great movie. We're still waiting, as of this recording, we're still waiting for Mickey 17 to come out. It's great. You know what Parasite is. You don't need me to recommend Parasite. It won Best Picture. It's the only international film to do that since ever? When? How long? Ever?
I think ever. Yeah, it's the first one ever. Yep.
Deserved. Great,
Yeah.
great movie.
Yep.
And my number one is a movie we talked about quite a bit recently because we just reviewed To Be or Not to Be, but it's a movie heavily influenced by To Be or Not to Be, Taika Waititi's last good movie, Jojo Rabbit. Love this movie to death. This was my introduction to Thomasin McKenzie, who has continued to have a great career. Scarlett Johansson, accent aside. As we know from my love for Gangs of New York, I'm okay with someone having a bad accent. She does a great job here. Taika's very funny as Hitler. Sam Rockwell is incredible as the German officer who is sympathetic to Germans being abused by their own government. Alfie Allen's really funny in a small role, but the real show stealers are Stephen Merchant as the head of the Gestapo and Archie Yates as Jojo Rabbit, who's played by Roman Griffin Davis, his little fat friend, who is so unbelievably charismatic and funny, and every line that comes out of his mouth is perfect.
All right, great. Well, I do want to mention, like I said, I do separate lists for features and documentaries, and in my documentary list, like I said, there's a lot of great documentaries that year. Love Antosha came in at number 9, right behind the Rolling Thunder Review, Bob Dylan documentary by Martin Scorsese, and right in front of a documentary called Maiden, which was about a female sailing, like an Olympic female sailing team that won a gold medal, or I don't know, something. They did something really great. It was a good documentary. It's been 5 years since I've seen it. But Love Antosha ranked pretty highly on my documentary list. Features-wise, amazing year for movies. I'm going to just run through my honorable mentions real quick. A lot of them have been mentioned already. The Todd Haynes movie Dark Waters came out that year, very good. I have John Wick 3 Parabellum on my honorable mention as well. James Mangold's Ford vs. Ferrari came out that year. Dolomite Is My Name. I've got Spider-Man Far From Home, Knives Out, Scorsese's The Irishman, Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse, Jojo Rabbit's in my honorable mention, Greta Gerwig's Little Women make up my honorable mentions. So, I mean, any of those movies could be in a top 10, and I would not, look twice at that. I think those are all great. My number 10 is Pedro Almodovar's Pain and Glory, featuring Antonio Banderas' best performance. He's an aging actor, trying to get back to acting, but he's having a hard time with that, and it's also got some flashbacks to his previous life. Just a really, really terrific performance, and not often you see Antonio Banderas do an entire role in Spanish these days. My number 9 was mentioned by Brad and talked about quite a bit. It's The Farewell. Yes, love this movie very much. Number 8, certainly not mentioned by Brad, because I know he does not like this movie, but The Safdie Brothers, Uncut Gems, featuring a great performance by Adam Sandler, a jewel dealer who just can't ever let anything go and always has to be going after the one next deal that's going to be the one. My number 7 is...
If I just need to defend myself real quick. If Uncut Gems, if I hadn't seen it when it came out, and I saw it now, and I didn't know anything about it, I'd think it was a cool movie. It was hyped up so much. Everyone's like, this is the greatest movie. Adam Sandler is the greatest actor of all time, and I think he's very good in it. I think everyone's very good in it. It's a well-constructed movie. But people were calling it we're mad it wasn't Best Picture. Give me a break.
Yeah, it was a little bit overblown, certainly, but also, I mean, you've got NBA star Kevin Garnett, who's really good in this movie. I just think it's a really, really cool movie. My number 7, we've talked about already, is Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Amazing performance by DiCaprio. It's got the him pointing meme, which we do all the time.
But in the movie Koch, Walter Matthau does the same thing, and that is my version of the pointing meme.
Well, you can have it. The rest of us have DiCaprio. My number 6, Jesse, I was surprised you didn't have this on your list, but my number 6 is Blinded by the Light.
I assumed that since we're talking about it, I left the spot for another one,
I think it's smart to do that, just to have more movies to talk about. Yeah. I also just want to shout out Love Antosha is 14 on my top 20 list.
That makes perfect sense, yeah. My number 5 is a tough watch, especially it came out not long after I went through a divorce, but it's Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story, starring Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson as a divorced couple trying to navigate raising their son together. Terrific performances, great score by Randy Newman. I don't know if I'll ever watch it again, but I thought it was incredibly well done. Laura Dern won her Oscar for this. She's great in it. Number 4, all of the rest of these movies have already been mentioned now. My number 4 is Sam Mendes' 1917. Really compelling movie, just well shot, well acted. You don't see a lot of World War I movies either. We seem to be inundated with a lot of World War II movies all the time. But like World War I, there's All Quiet on the Western Front and 1917 and this. And there's I can't think of any others off the top of my head, honestly. So I think it's a little bit of...
There's Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
Oh, yeah, there's that too. Yep, which we covered, and is a great movie. My number 3 is Avengers Endgame, which is, like I said, we've talked about before. Super satisfying ending, a great culmination of years and almost 24 movies. Love everything about Endgame. My number 2 is a movie, Brad, that you mentioned, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Just an amazing love story, beautifully shot, amazing performances. Yeah, just outstanding movie. And then my number 1, and I think my wife will be okay with me mentioning this, because it came out, when did we see it? It was like October, November of 2019 when we saw it. We'd only been together for about 6 months or so at that point, and we went down. We had to drive an hour and a half out of our way to see it. We had to drive down to Traverse City to see it. And when she saw it, she watched movies like, before we got together, but not like obsessively or the way I did. And when we went and saw Parasite, when it was over, she was like, I need to see better movies. Like, it was like kind of like a turning point for her where she was like, I think I'm missing out on something, on some things, and this Parasite is kind of like a big watershed moment for her. So it holds a special place in our relationship, as well as I just think it's a banger of a movie.
She had to go back and rearrange all of her old star ratings.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
All right, awesome. All right, Jesse, thanks so much for being on. Why don't you tell folks, you mentioned you have multiple podcasts. Tell folks where they can hear you.
Yeah, first off, I want to say that this was a blast, and I kind of feel like I'm the kid that's reading in the junior high level, and you guys are in a graduate class with movies. Hey, I feel like I've been able to audit a college course and having a blast.
I just want to reiterate again, though, that it feels really good to have someone come on and talk about movies that we're not going to talk about. Like The Tall Girl, that was such a good pull. In a trillion years, that movie was never going to come up in the history of Never Did It. I am so glad that it has. Fighting with My Family is a movie that Jake and I both saw when it came out because we're huge wrestling fans and talked about at length when it came out, and it wouldn't have come up unless you had brought it up.
The Rock is hilarious in it when he flips on character, and kind of talks about her. And once again, it's just a lot of fun. Yeah, my family would tell you, in fact, my family would tell you I do too much podcasting. My main podcast is Set Lusting Bruce, a Bruce Springsteen fan podcast. And basically what I do is I talk to Bruce Springsteen fans from around the world. I've talked to everyone from Russia to the UK to New Zealand to Canada and obviously the US. And we just talk about how music has affected their lives. I do B-side episodes where I have someone who's a fan of The Counting Crows, Aretha Franklin, name the artist, and we have a discussion about why that music affects them and how it helps them through this thing called life. Perfectly Good Podcast is Sylvan Groth and I are going through every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order. And Sylvan is the one who says that she thinks we need to do a intervention on my podcasting, but we can't till we get to letter Z. She's like, I'm not going to cut you off. I do a Doctor Who podcast, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, where we talk about new and classic Who. And then my last one, Last Best Hope for Conversation, our Babylon 5 podcast, where we are going through Babylon 5. We are on season 5. And then Lou, Karen, and I do similar to you guys. We call it the JKL Media Podcast. We're doing Haunting of Bly Manor. We've done, Lou and Karen had never seen Stagecoach, and they were not as impressed as I was. I'm a sucker for John Ford movies, though. So, yeah, we do that. So, and I am at Twitter or AKX, Jesse Jackson DFW. setlustingbruce@gmail.com. You can email me to say, hey, Jesse, I want to talk about my favorite musician, and we'll get you on the show.
All right, Jesse, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.